All right, everyone, here's a little bit of a meandering rant about the different fan bases of the Democratic candidates in the 2020 field that I've noticed personally in my political interactions with them. Of course, not being a Democrat or a Republican is helpful, although most people, like when you encounter people on the left, if they're aware of my existence, most of them think that I'm far right, which is hilarious, so it's clear that they're not getting their information from me and my actual content. They're getting it from, I don't know, something that they read on BuzzFeed. That time that the Wall Street Journal name dropped me alongside Alex Jones was pretty funny. It's hilarious times. Anyway, I figured I would go through and sort of analyze it from the top down. I'll go roughly. There are some that, like I'm not going to even talk about Cory Booker. I don't even know. I've never met a Cory Booker fan. Literally, unlike when I say that ironically about Joe Biden, it's meant to be a joke. When I say it about Cory Booker, it's just the truth. So I'll go through here, and this is going to be opinion heavy as opposed to maybe more straightforward analysis and historical politics heavy. But here we go. We got to keep in mind that there are different voting blocks involved. For instance, with Joe Biden, we'll start with him as the front runner in 5 of the last 6 polls. He's managed to recover from his slump there to some degree, and Warren is on her way down, thankfully, at the moment. His voting bloc is largely comprised of people who looked at the rest of the field and felt scared, or they looked at Trump and felt scared and felt he was the only one who was electable. I think people who are resistant to the idea of far leftism, maybe are concerned about the AOC and Bernie Sanders sort of people in the Democratic Party, they don't believe that they can win. I don't think it's so much they're scared of their platforms, because, of course, Joe Biden isn't the only one there that's got a more neoliberal look at life. They just want to stop Trump, and they worry about the electability of those people. Otherwise, I can see they would be going to someone like Steyer, even Buttigieg potentially, because he is technically now viable. He's above 7 in a lot of the recent polls. One of them had him, I think, at 10. That's actually, I mean, if he climbs into the double digits, then he's within striking distance of one good debate away from peaking. And we'll see if he can hold on to that, or if he has a Kamala Harris moment. A Ben Carson moment, if you will. So Joe Biden's fans, I think, are comprised of that plus people with Obama nostalgia. They remember, things were different only a few years ago and they were more calm. Like they want to fall back asleep, so to speak. I think a lot of older voters maybe, because, I mean, they don't care about his age maybe so much if they're already in their 70s or at least close to it. They're like, he's okay. I think the stubborn unwillingness of anyone to get off the Biden train, because he's been so consistently polling at the same general range, the fact that he can blow a gasket live on stage, become completely incoherent, or have an eye bleed on a live debate stage and not really suffer any political repercussions shows he does have a hardened fan base. It's just when you talk to people that actually support him, and I have met a few, I mean, a lot of people, the joke is I've never met a Joe Biden fan. They're invisible, they don't actually exist, it's all some sort of DNC ruse. That's the joke. The reality is that for the most part, it's just the lack of any form of enthusiasm. They're willing to settle for Biden because they believe he can beat Trump, and for no other reason. They just want to get rid of Trump. Now we move on to Warren. Warren's fans come in 2 flavors. The deeply feministic fans, and people who I think genuinely have been convinced that she's a leftist, but she's the safe leftist, so to speak. She's the newly minted leftist who's not quite as far out, even though she's basically taken Bernie Sanders' platform and replicated it, without actually explaining that she'll tax people more to pay for the Medicaid for all plan she would never even think to impose. The truth is she's a neoliberal. She's a total con artist, and she has conned her fans. I can tell you this right now, unless you're voting for Elizabeth Warren and supporting her because she has a vagina and you're a wedge issue identity politics voter, you have no legitimate reason to back her. You would arguably be more likely to back her if you were a neoliberal business dem than if you were a progressive, because she's not a progressive. The things that she's saying are a selling point. Therefore, she's managed to create a block of voters. I think probably the least intelligent voting bloc within the Democratic field is Elizabeth Warren's fan base, because they come in those 2 flavors. They've either been fooled into thinking she's the safe progressive alternative to Bernie, who's almost a decade older. He's had a heart attack now. That seems less safe. They're flocking to her because she offers them the same thing, but a little bit younger and more well-spoken. Argument better for the cameras, arguably. And also, she hasn't had a disastrous failure of a presidential campaign in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, of all people. So people who perceive that as safer. The Bernie bros will crucify you if you say this. I'm not claiming that. I'm simply saying this is what they perceive. Perception over reality within such a thing. And then feminist voters, third wavers, the far out there social justice feminists. They're post-third wave at this point. There's no even reason to use the term feminist to describe them. Just call them third wavers. Then you get down to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has an extremely fervent core fan base. I question whether it's quite as large as some of the Bernie fans would claim. However, there's something like 10 or 15% of the Dem field that's hardened behind him. They see him, they're honesty voters. Some of these people I don't think even care about his platform so much as the fact that he's been so consistently advocating the same things for a half century. You can't argue with the fact that Bernie Sanders is the most consistent Democrat within the field. He has consistently used the term socialist to describe himself and advocated out-and-out socialism for 50 years for the United States. He has done this without one misstep in his entire career. He's the only one there who I don't think ever would be tainted by a personal scandal, because he's a fanatic. Now, that's not a great thing, but it does make him, in that way, more honest. His fans, I think, appreciate that. Then there are people who are far left, the socialists, the intelligent ones. If they're more geared towards platform itself and authenticity, and especially if they're economic leftists first and foremost, they're a Bernie fan. Because Elizabeth Warren is more of the wedge issue pandering personality leftist, who's not even, again, really even into leftism. She's a neoliberal, a corporate hawk who has a lot of corporate money. She's just not soliciting it at the moment so she can appear grassroots. People who are intelligent enough to understand this but are still leftists are usually going to be Bernie Sanders fans. If they're not intelligent enough to understand they're being conned by Warren, then they're a Warren fan because they look at Sanders. He's considerably older. He's male. That doesn't help you within the modern Democratic Party. Likewise, there are some socialistic voters that maybe do care about that element more, and you know, they get called chauvinistic by Elizabeth Warren. I think it's more resistance to the insatiable sexism of certain far-left post-feminist voters. But you could say that doesn't really matter what term you use. Yeah, they're Bernie bros. I've met some of them. Then you have Booty Judge or Buttigieg, whichever you will. Either one is, fodder for late night comedy, or would be if they weren't clogging themselves up with the same fucking 3 Trump jokes over and over every night. His fans, I have a feeling that slightly older, more religious Democratic voters like him more. Again, he's young, that maybe even reminds him a little bit of JFK, I would say. That being said, he's also got an element of the left that sort of backs him, again, for electability reasons. It's just not as formidable as Biden's bloc, on the electability issue, that is. I look at him and I see, perhaps the only truly viable Democrat left in the field. The problem being he refuses to use wedge issues, and that may be part of his core fan base that like him because he won't campaign on, hey, I'm young and gay. He'd rather campaign on, X, Y, and Z, these are my policies. Now, he has jumped on the Trump orange man bad train. But, you can't avoid doing that. Biden initially hesitated to do that. Now he's constantly rambling about how he'd like to punch Trump and we need to impeach and he's the worst since Hitler and stuff like that. It's amazing how times have changed. I can remember he called that hyperbolic a few months ago. But all of a sudden, the Biden campaign embracing the identity politics. Booty Judge is so averse to this, though, I question whether he can win the primaries. The Democrats have become so far left, so social justice warrior enabling, that it's not clear that anyone can scrape together enough votes unless they do use a lot of identity politics. What does this say for the upcoming general once you've actually got a nominee who's had to delve into that dirty trench warfare inter-party? It's going to be messy. Then you have Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris's fans are the Yas Queen Slay style fans that nonetheless don't like the fact that Warren is white. Her fans are racist feminists, largely. I mean that completely. I've had to interact with some of these people. You'd be surprised. It's not just a stereotype. And then there are people who I guess, they latched onto her thinking she was electable, and this is a dwindling number. A dwindling number of people, they looked at the first debate. She arguably did the best of those that had any, sort of momentum at all. And so they just sort of got behind her. Now they're getting back off and she's, slipping from 5th to 6th, arguably. Then you have Yang. The Yang fans, a lot of them are ironic individuals that I don't think are particularly political, or they've become so black-pilled they're like, fuck it. The world is ending, give me my UBI. Basically, as a joke. I think some young, intelligent individuals who are more into the tech world have latched on to Yang, just because he's the only one there who probably can do math in his head without a calculator. Let's face it, most of us can't. And so they see him as more intelligent. They're certainly not getting behind him for his debate skills. He's been somewhat inclined towards wedge issues, but not as much as some. The fact that he broke down crying and rambling about his kids in the gun control era there that we briefly had several months ago was quite funny. I think it's more ironic fans, fans that care about the fact that at the very least he's capable of doing math, leading to the idea that he'd be good for the economy, and UBI fans. It's really like almost a single platform movement just towards universal basic income as a post-socialism experiment. Like, we're going to go even beyond that. We're just going to hyper-equalize society. I think it's quite funny. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard. Well, actually, Beto O'Rourke technically is ahead of her. Although I don't know. Again, I've never personally met a Beto fan. I have interacted with some of them on Twitter. These seem to be, ironically, they're very fiery. They're very with it. They're extremely energized. They believe that Beto is the one to lead them. I think in part because Beto O'Rourke, of all of the Democrats, arguably, other than maybe Kamala Harris, is the most on the attack. That is the most given towards negative campaigning as a strategy. This is more of a counterpart to Trump campaign strategy than what we saw with Biden. Like, several months he refused to attack Trump at all, beyond saying, well, I think that this thing he did was regrettable or something. There was no fire, there was no energy. And so he never had an energetic fan base that wanted negative campaigning. These are the blood sports fans. They want Beto O'Rourke as a sort of young-ish Gen Xer dude, kind of cringy, but he's not in his 70s, and that helps, generally speaking. With the energy, with the drive and momentum of your campaign, it might help to be the younger candidate. Usually, they believe, will debate Trump properly, has sort of the fire, is capable of responding quickly to him. Now, I think that's Buttigieg. They think it's Beto. They have a disagreement with me on that one, but I think that that's his core fan base. Negative voters. People who are more on the attack against Trump, who believe the deplorables thing, and so forth. Then we have Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard's fans are also highly energized. Some of them have Trump derangement syndrome very badly. But she doesn't go far left as much. She's more likely to talk about military service and stuff. Again, there are people who back her because at this point, I think, most of her voters are people who are mad at the DNC. They look at the clown car election field of the Democrats, say none of these people are electable. Tulsi Gabbard is the only one willing to call out consistently the DNC or any high-ranking Democrat. Biden, meanwhile, is saying, why can't we just get along? Cory Booker says this famously. He's the nice guy candidate. Maybe that's his 1% of the field. Tulsi Gabbard's the only one willing to go on the attack, not just against Trump, but against the DNC. She's saying, look, the party itself is sick. The party itself, how are we going to win if we're acting like this? We need reform within before we can do anything about Trump. She's the only one supporting that. This, by the way, shows me the Democrats are going to implode. The fact that Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have double-digit support shows me that the majority of Democrats, left, right, and center, want electability over any form of accountability within the party. The problem is you can't have electability unless you purge the cancer that is neoliberalism from the Democratic Party. The corporate money and the corruption at the highest levels within the Democratic Party is why it's losing. I don't care what matchup polls say, oh, Trump is 15 points behind Elizabeth Warren in a hypothetical matchup. That will disappear on Election Day. It'll have disappeared months before that. It will narrow and narrow and narrow, especially when Trump gets on stage and runs rings around whoever the fucking Democratic nominee is. And there are so many Democrats right now delusional enough to be in denial about this fact. They think Trump is weak. They disagree with every competent analyst in the Western world. They are insane. Tulsi Gabbard is the only one trying to point this out. And what do? They call her a Russian asset. Oh, Tulsi Gabbard saying that the Democrats could possibly be wrong, that maybe our messaging is off. Maybe our platform is non-existent or makes no sense. Oh, she's just a Russian over there. They're going to lose because they didn't listen to her. I don't think you should nominate Tulsi Gabbard, but I do think you should take her seriously. By the way, Tulsi Gabbard deciding to be unemployed after the election by not seeking her Hawaii House seat again. She should just do that. She's popular enough to win it with flying colors. Why the fuck wouldn't she take the position again? I guess she just wants to have her pension at this point. That's about all. Peace out.